crazy Tony Bird talking, Ranger Tony with the Ding Darling Refuge, and Ranger Janet. She is our new urban ranger at the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. But they are the team that the Ding Darling Wildlife Society supports. You know, they have this amazing refuge that they can't do it alone. And you'll see a little video about who we are as the Ding Darling Wildlife Society that tells you what we do in supporting them. But they're amazing, doing great work, and we appreciate them. My name is Bergie Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the Ding Darling Wildlife Society, which is the nonprofit arm supporting the refuge. And I told everybody, sign up for your Ding on the Wing. If you haven't, I saw a number of people sign up. Thank you for that. We have our Go Wild for Ding event, which is February 9th. Fabulous event. It will be in here. We have windows open, extra air filters, and all sorts of things, but that's our big fundraiser, and it's a ton of fun. It's the year of the Anhinga. It's our 40th anniversary of the Ding Darling Wildlife Society, and we are celebrating it all year long. One of those celebrations is Wellness Week, so this is kind of a preemptive kickoff of Wellness Week, this presentation today by Dr. Joe Blanda and Jessica Berry. Where is Jess? So Jess has been the leader on the Wellness Week and has done an amazing job working with everybody and with the refuge and putting this Wellness Week together. And if you haven't signed up for anything, they are Eventbrite programs. They're keeping them 10 and under, but as some fill up, they add more. If anybody has grandkids or young children in their bailiwick of the household or visiting during that week of February 7th, Animal Olympics. There are still spots remaining for that, and Ranger Tony runs that. It's where the kids act like animals and jump like bobcats, and it's a ton of fun, and it gets them moving, and it's all about getting outside, wellness, mindfulness, everything. We will also be unveiling our new Mindfulness Trail. And I don't know if you all have seen, this is a big thing, and I think since COVID-19 hit us all, we all became, reintroduced to nature, many of us, because it was the one way we could get out and feel safe. And I was telling Dr. Joe, I had to stop off at home and drop off my computer to head to a meeting yesterday in the Drew Barrymore show. I don't know, I've never seen it before, but it was on TV for the dogs. And I listened, and it was all about mindfulness. So she had a mindfulness expert on there. I was at Walgreens getting my shingle shot, and they had a National Geographic magazine specifically written about mindfulness and getting out in nature. So we are on the cusp of something wonderful, and it's something that's been around forever. And Dr. Joe is going to be a big part of that. But the Ding Darling Wildlife Society, like I said, is celebrating 40 years. And back then it was a group of volunteers that wanted to help the refuge spread the message of conservation, handing out maps, giving a few tours. And then they decided there were so many people, they wanted to help build the visitor center that's there. That was fully funded by philanthropy. And it changed the whole dynamic of what the Friends group was. When Tony joined the refuge, I don't know, nearly 18 years ago? 20 years ago. There were, 20 total staff members managing less land than what they have now, and probably 600,000 visitors every year, and their budget was one that today, the budget has been cut by 60%, their staff has been cut by 50%, yet they are managing more land, luckily because the Ding Darling Wildlife Society has been able to acquire some land due to philanthropy, and they've been able to get some through some federal dollars, and then they have nearly 1 million visitors every year. They can't do it. Half the staff, more visitors, less money, and that's where the Friends group comes in, so that's who we are. And you can protect all the land you want, but if you don't educate and inspire, who's going to want to protect it later? When we're all gone, we need to do our job also educating and inspiring, and that's part of what we're doing by reaching out into the community beyond Sanibel. But I was just talking to someone today, they go, the refuge was crazy busy. And it is, because people want to get outside and learn and understand and value why places like Ding Darling are so important. So when they go back to Michigan and Ohio and Connecticut, there will be spaces there, and we are part of a larger system of 560 plus refuges around the country. Ours is the best, I like to say. But it's because of people like all of you who care and want to protect and preserve, and we work very hard with the refuge in bringing the wildlife on wheels out to the urban communities. They're hiring an urban refuge ranger to help with that. So it's all teamwork, and there is no one organization or one person who can do it all, and we all have to work together. So we're blessed here on the island to have so many wonderful organizations working towards conservation, but also education and everything. So we are blessed, but we're blessed to have all of you here who care about learning what we're going to learn today from Dr. Joe Blanda. And as part of our 40th anniversary, and to connect individuals with the natural world, as I shared with you, we have the Wellness Week. So you can download that with the QR code and learn more about that. But today's lecture is entitled Nature Can Heal. And we are truly honored to have Dr. Blanda giving this lecture. He is a recently retired orthopedic surgeon with a continued passion to help people and nature. By sharing his knowledge on how the outdoors can help us, he hopes people will get more involved in helping nature heal. He's a member of the Sierra Club since 1989. He now sits on the executive committee of the Portage Trail group of the Sierra Club, promoting inclusion, sustainable living, and political awareness. He's an active board member of the Conservancy for the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, leading mindfulness walks in nature. He recently became a certified forest therapy guide through the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. Because of his appreciation of the conserved natural beauty of the J.N. Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge, he and his family spend much of the year here on the island in nature. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Joe Blanda.
Thank you, Bernie. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out. And also thanks for being safe and smart and following the safety guidelines for COVID precautions. So, I'd also like to give a special thanks to Bergie for the wonderful work she does with the Wildlife Society. I'd like to give a special thanks to Ranger Tony Westland, who just fulfilled one of my dreams of 25 years and made me a volunteer at the And also a special thanks to Jessica Berry. She was the brains behind the new Mindfulness Trail. I'll talk a little bit more about that in my presentation. Any birders out here in the crowd? Okay. Any serious birders? Okay, good. I have photographs that I've taken in this presentation. All the photographs are mine. And I have one mislabeled slide, so whoever picks that up is going to get a special mindfulness guided tour. So, one of the main points of my presentation is that nature can heal. It helped heal me, and I'll get into that story. And there are many health benefits of being mindful out in nature. So I'm going to share my story, how it helped me, but I also want to emphasize that nature can heal if we help it. In other words, our environment needs us to help it. So I've always appreciated nature. I was born and raised out in the mountains of southwestern Pennsylvania. Spent a lot of time in the outdoors, and at least I thought I appreciated nature. But I mostly received nature's gifts, the serenity, bird sightings and wildlife photography, cooperative fish for my fly fishing adventures, and finding that next spectacular hiking trail or camping spot. So it was more of a one-way connection. I was more of a receiver. But that was about to change. I've been an intermediate bird since the late 80s, and a lot of that time was down here vacationing at an island that I fell in love with and spend time here with my family. And I'm reminded of a John Muir quote that in every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks. Well, my life changed and my family's life changed in the fall of 2013 when my then 17-year-old son, Joe, was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. He suffered a concussion in a soccer match, and further testing showed this big mass. The next day, he underwent a 9-hour surgery at the local Cleveland clinic, and unfortunately woke up without any deficits, but my journey dealing with cancer began. So Joe was given the prognosis, the bad prognosis, and we're driving home from the hospital, and I see back in my mirror, I see him looking on his iPhone, obviously fact-checking what he was told. And when we got home, he said to me, "Dad, you know, there really aren't any good treatments for what I have. We should go ahead and raise money for cancer research." Well, my head was spinning in 100 directions, and that just kind of went over my head. But then 2 days later, he called me over to his laptop, showed me a video he was watching of his surgeon talking about brain cancer research. Well, that was enough, and so we started a foundation called Blast Glioblastoma, and we raised $1.5 million for brain cancer research, something he was very, very proud of. So we had some big fundraising events, and that's where I met Hallie Mason. Hallie was a palliative care nurse for 30 years in Akron, and she offered a guided birding trip for one of our auctions as an auction item. Well, I kind of weaseled my way on that guided trip, and Hallie and I became good friends, and she became a mentor for me for birding. And as you see later, she became my big-year coach. Well, during my son's 3-year battle against brain cancer, he and I really shared a passion for the outdoors, as did the rest of my family. And Joe and I even talked about someday maybe taking a year and mountain biking and kayaking and birding our way across the country. Well, unfortunately, that never happened. So I'll fast forward to the spring of 2016. It was 1-year anniversary of my son's death from the brain cancer. And I craved the solace of nature, kind of for comfort to deal with my loss. This is a photograph of a native wildflower. Scientific name is Violet Blanda. That's the name of my mother. And that same year that I lost Joe, I lost both of my parents. And so grief and bouts of depression became common parts of my life, challenges for me. And so I'm often reminded of a quote from one of my favorite nature writers. He was an environmentalist from the 40s and 50s, Sig Olson. And he said, "I have found that people go to the wilderness for many things, but the most important is perspective. They may think they go for the scenery, but in reality, it is something deeper. They go to the wilderness for the good of their souls." And so May of 2016, it was about a year after losing my son and parents, I joined Haley, my birding mentor, at McGee Marsh, which is kind of a migratory hotspot up in Ohio. And we saw an amazing 97 different species of birds, including this black-burning warbler. So I came home that day kind of inspired and feeling good. And I jumped on my bike and I took my usual bike ride up to All Saints Cemetery to visit my son's grave. And as I approached his grave, I heard a bird song that I kind of didn't recognize, so I slowed down, looked, and right there was a bobolink. Now, in my neck of the woods, that's an unusual bird. Most of their habitat up there has been devastated, and we don't have a lot of bobolinks. So anyway, didn't think much of it. I coasted down to his gravesite, got off my bike, and I hear this beautiful song of an eastern meadowlark. And I look at the fence post near his gravesite, and there it was. And I'm thinking, geez, this is weird. These are two birds I've never seen in Ohio before. So I'm biking back home, going down my driveway to my house, and right in front of me flies a common pileated woodpecker. Almost made me wreck. Well, pileated woodpecker was Joe's favorite bird. And it was the last bird he and I saw together here on the island. Well, that was bird number 100 for me. And I thought, wow, what a special day. And I had seen these 3 special birds all within about 20 minutes. So that evening, as I reflected on the day's events, I kind of felt a message, kind of a drive to go ahead and do a big year of birding, and to do it for a cause. I thought, well, I'll raise money for brain cancer research. That's what Joe would want me to do. And so I went around to a lot of our donors and got pledges. A lot of people donated a dime a bird, maybe $1 a bird. I thought I'd go out and see 200 birds. I was still working full-time as an orthopedic surgeon. And I thought I'd make some trips and maybe see 200, 300 birds. So what is a big year? A big year is where you spend 12 months and you count the different species of birds you see, whether it's in your yard or in your state, or for me it was in the United States. I wanted to travel a little bit. So I called Hallie, and she was excited. She always wanted to do a big year, but because of her work schedule, she couldn't. She shows up at my house with a big pile of birding books and maps, and she became my coach and one and only cheerleader. Well, one other thing we did was we shared a Mary Oliver poetry book, and a phrase from that book goes, "See the grass, the trees, the sky. Take the time to notice." So she recommended I head off to Maine and participate in the Acadia Birding Festival. I needed some help in finding birds, and the birding festivals were a good place where I could get on some guided trips. And when I think of Maine, I'm reminded of another John Muir quote where he said, "Keep close to nature and break clear away once in a while. Climb a mountain or spend a week in the woods. Wash your spirit clean." You know, I saw a lot of birds in Maine, but I also started to become more present in the moment, more aware of my surroundings, just being out there. And if you've ever been to Acadia National Park, you know what I mean. Well, I'm a bit of a do-it-yourselfer type of person, and I had read an article about Bicknell's thrush and the environmental challenges facing this somewhat rare bird. So I wanted to try and see one, but all the guided trips, no luck seeing a Bicknell's thrush. But one of the local guides gave me a tip and drew a little map on the back of a sheet of paper, and the next morning I woke up at 3 a.m. and drove over to Saddleback Mountain, Appalachia Trail head, got on the trail, climbed up the mountain, and it was so foggy, the map didn't make sense, kind of felt lost. But up ahead in a meadow, I saw this backpacker's tent, and there was a person standing near it. And as I walked closer, I saw he had binocular straps on, and I approached and acknowledged my presence, said hello, and he turned around. He had binoculars, and I right away recognized he's a young man, probably about my son's age, tall, lanky like my son, dressed kind of cool like my son did. And you know, I greeted him, and the first thing he said to me was, "Are you here to see a Bicknell's thrush?" And I'm thinking, what the heck? You know, I wanted to talk to the kid, find out where he's from, what he's doing. But, as you birders know, I wanted to see a Bicknell's thrush. So I said, sure. And he waved me on, and we go walking down this trail. And driving over that morning, I was listening to bird song on my tape, on my radio, and just to recognize a Bicknell's thrush song. And sure enough, just as he raised his hand for me to stop walking, I hear the Bicknell's thrush singing. So he motioned for me to get in front of him, and stood there for a few minutes, and sure enough, this Bicknell's thrush popped up right in front of me. And it was just one of those awe moments, one of those special times. I got chills. I can remember it so clearly. So I turned around to share my excitement with this young man, and he wasn't there. And, well, I figured, okay, he went back to his tent. And so as I'm standing there, enjoying the sight of this Bicknell's thrush, listening to its song, this gray jay flies in, and that's another bird that had eluded me during the my big year festival up in Acadia. And then a spruce grouse walked across the trail as I was walking back to his tent. So I see 3 very special, unusual birds that I hadn't seen yet, all within about 20 minutes. I get back to his tent site, tent's gone. Follow the trail, look down the mountain at this large open meadow, nowhere to be found. Oh well. Back in Ohio, I got to see a lot of really neat birds. And every time I see a bald eagle, whether it's up there or down here, I'm reminded of the recovery of this once endangered bald eagle. And that's something we caused with our overutilization of DDT. But we've now cleaned that up and bald eagles made a great recovery. I found myself becoming more mindful while out in nature, becoming more aware of things such as water quality, and how clean water is so important for the health of all of our species, including us. I became more mindful of the environment, of things like habitat and bugs, and birds like this Canada warbler depend on a clean habitat for their subsistence, just like we do. I'm also very lucky up in near the Cuyahoga Valley National Park to have some beautiful yard birds, and that makes me appreciate how fortunate I am to have biodiversity right outside my door, both up in Ohio at home and down here at the place I have. And so, I found myself becoming more aware of birdsong, and I realized how much I benefited from the calming effect of their melodies. Well, back to my big year. My next trip was, I tucked my family into having a family vacation to Alaska. But little did they know it was really going to be a birding trip for me.
They do.
And up there, it was July, there were 20 hours of sunlight, so, I'd get up before they were stirring and get out and see some birds, and then I'd do stuff with them, and then the evening, they'd be tired and I'd be out birding. But one thing about Alaska for me was I really gained an appreciation for wilderness, for open space, and that we really do need to help it stay that way. And I'm reminded of a quote by Ed Abbey: "Wilderness is not a luxury, but a necessity of the human spirit." So I did take my family on some interesting excursions, and we got to see some really cool stuff up there. Sometimes they thought it was a little, maybe too much of excitement as this bear was hunting some salmon. So one day I took a drive up Glen Highway, and I had 4 birds on my wish list, and I wasn't really having any luck. I was about to turn around, but I thought, I'm going to stop at this trailhead and take a little hike. So I went out on a trail, and just beautiful scenery. I was admiring the beautiful scenery, and I turned around to walk back to my car, and there's this beautiful, spectacular hawk owl just staring at me. And so I'm standing there taking it all in, and within the next 15 minutes, a northern shrike is perched in another tree nearby, and a pine grosbeak. Again, 3 unexpected special birds in about 20 minutes. Next stop on my big year birding excursions was the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival. Some of you may have been there, where I was treated to many beautiful birds, such as this green jay, and a bird that's my favorite bird to pronounce, Ferruginous pygmy-owl. And many other beautiful birds like this golden-fronted woodpecker. Just a great place for birding. But the highlight of the trip, one evening I was talking to the director of the festival, and she actually lost a loved one to brain cancer, and when she heard I was raising money in my big year, she connected me with a birder in Laredo, Texas, who had just found a really unusual bird, a bird that had never been to the United States except one other time it was documented. So, get up at 3 a.m. again, drive way over to Laredo, meet this man who shows me the area where they had been seeing the Amazon Kingfisher. And I'm looking without luck, and the day's moving on, and I was about ready to give up when all of a sudden a lady came up over the hill and kind of urgently waved me toward her. So I followed her, and she points, and there it is, Amazon Kingfisher. McQuaid. Some of you may know Tammy and Dave McQuaid. They're very avid birders from Fort Myers and spend a lot of time on the island. So after that, I went down to a trail nearby that the local birder had told me about, and within 20 minutes of seeing this Amazon Kingfisher, I find a white-collared seed eater, and then a flock of green parakeets fly over. 2 other birds I didn't expect to see, again, all within 15, 20 minutes. But not all of my birding trips were peaceful and exciting. I had one experience where I ended up with kind of the Rambo birding guide. And he drove like a maniac from spot to spot and ran through the woods playing this loud callback tape. It was so loud and aggressive and annoying, and he even did that in a national park. And so when we asked him if he could guide us without the tape, he said, "Hey, look, if you guys want to see birds, it's the only way I know to show you lots of birds." Well, that didn't sit well with me, and I just kind of went off on my own and still had a good time. Next trip was Tucson Birding Festival. There I saw 98 new species. That was the most I saw on any of the festivals. And again, I had that urge to kind of go off on my own one day, and there was one special bird down there that I hadn't seen yet, and a local guide gave me a tip on which trail. It was a lot longer drive than I expected, and I got to the trailhead. It was pretty late in the day, and I started up the trail, going up and up and up. I really didn't know how far to go. And all of a sudden, out ahead, I see a black bear and a cub cross the trail in front of me, and they kind of stopped, and the mother's looking at me, and I thought, okay, I'm leaving, I'm going home. Turn around, start kind of backing down the trail, and right there in front of me is this elegant trogon. And I just couldn't believe it. Another awe moment, another special moment. I stood and admired it for a while, and it was getting dark, so I headed back to my car where there was a birder in the parking lot, standing there looking at a western screech owl, which happened to be another bird that I hadn't seen at the festival. And we're standing there admiring it when all of a sudden we hear a Mexican whippoorwill sing out. Again, 3 unexpected, unusual, special birds, all within about 20 minutes. So I'm at work one day, and Hallie calls me, and I always took her calls, and she said, "Joe, somebody just canceled on a special birding trip to St. Paul's Island." I didn't even know where St. Paul's Island was. But she'd already talked to my staff, and they arranged to give me 5 days out of my office to participate in this guided bird trip to St. Paul's Island, which is a little island out in the Bering Sea off Alaska. And you pick up a lot of unusual birds from Asia. And so I went ahead and saw some really cool stuff there. Gray-crowned rosy finch, some really unusual sandpipers, this sharp-tailed sandpiper and wood sandpiper. What a trip it was, very special. So I had an orthopedic conference to attend in Denver, and when Hallie found out about that, she showed up at my house with this map with all these arrows and said, "Joe, there's 16 birds in Colorado that you haven't seen yet. And you just need to go to these spots, and I'll give you specific directions." So, I'm out in Denver and kind of skipped out on the conference and drove around quite a bit, and I tied in some hiking and fly fishing. But gee, I burned a lot of fossil fuel. I did find the 16 birds, thank goodness. She'd have been upset. But I did make a big carbon footprint, and it made me realize that, I need to focus on sustainable travel. And so, since then I've tried to rent hybrid vehicles if I fly somewhere. I try to find eco-friendly lodging. I actually tent camp a lot, particularly during the pandemic. And I started buying carbon credits when I fly. It's kind of a way to make you feel better about flying, and the money that you pay goes to a cause, And I picked an eco-friendly lodge and shade-grown coffee farm down in South America, where a lot of these spectacular warblers that I'd like to see spend the winter. Well, my next stop was with my family back to Sanibel Island. Well, they didn't see much of me because I toured a lot of the state to find other birds that I needed to see, such as this purple gallinule. See a lot of great egrets in the area. But I also found some pretty unusual birds in Florida, including this Bachman sparrow. But, you know, I found myself becoming more and more mindful of the intricacies in the environment, the small things in nature. And I developed a sort of a spiritual connection with nature. And boy, that felt good. That deeper awareness, being present in the moment, really helped me deal with the loss of my son. You know, I found counting birds became less important. You know, and I also better appreciated the importance of nature and the insects that nourish our migratory birds. And, you know, our insect population is down 50 to 70%, mostly because of what we've done to this planet. And, you know, we all need to think about that and do more to correct that. Well, you know, being more mindful, I noticed things that I otherwise would have missed before this sort of transformation during my big year. And of course, too, feeling better and better able to deal with my grief, I became more aware of nature's healthy benefits and did a lot of research on it. And so what are these healthy benefits? You know, I think we all have experienced the mental health benefit of being out in nature. But, you know, there's been a lot of good research. And we do need to believe science. And there's close to 1,000 published scientific articles in medical journals. And what that means is that these good medical journals have a peer review system where they have experts looking at all the submitted research studies, and they look at them for you know, just how accurate and how good the study was done, and then they publish the good articles. And like I said, there's about 1,000 good articles that confirm that there are benefits to being out in nature beyond the mental health benefits. If you spend time in nature, your cardiovascular system, it gets benefit from that, and that's different than the exercise of walking. When you're out in nature, there's certain hormones and chemicals that are released in your body, and those have good effects on our heart and blood vessels. It's also been documented that spending time in nature decreases the risk of obesity or diabetes. They found that it's easier to manage pain. It helps a lot of chronic pain patients, and I took advantage of this in my orthopedic practice and talked a lot of people into spending more time at the park, even if it was just sitting on a bench. We know from a lot of research that it helps battle addiction problems, such as cigarettes, alcohol, drugs. And another really important issue is the goodness it does for our youth. There's so many good studies that shows that it's so healthy for young people. And it also has been documented that it helps people better manage attention deficit disorder and autism. Now, one of the most fascinating health benefits of nature is that there are studies, multiple studies, that show that it strengthens your immune system. They did studies in Japan where they took a group of people and they had them stay in hotel rooms, and through half the group they pumped in the scent, the aroma of evergreen trees. The other half not. And then they checked blood levels and found that the people who had the exposure to those chemicals, they're referred to as phytoncides, chemicals that our plants and trees put off everywhere. You often don't smell the aroma, but they're there. And those people that were exposed to that had a marked elevation in immune enhancement cells, referred to as natural killer cells or lymphocytes. And those directly strengthen our immune system to help fight infections such as COVID, and as well as help fight cancer. So get out in nature. What's the history behind using the health benefits of nature? Well, in the late 1800s, a psychiatrist in England was trying to correct the problem with kind of barbaric handling of mental health patients that were institutionalized. And he started allowing his patients walk out in the meadow that was near the institution and got him interested in gardening. And he found that a lot of those patients were able to get back into society. So that spread, and a lot of our institutions in this country continue to do that up until about the 50s, when pharmaceutical companies put out a lot of drugs to treat mental health problems, and the emphasis came to use drugs instead of nature, unfortunately. You all know how we utilize sanitariums for TB, and then in 1980, a well-respected, famous professor at Harvard, E.O. Wilson, who recently passed away, published a book on biophilia, the love of nature. And he describes how we feel better when we're out in nature because that's where we evolved. And we have this innate urge to get out in nature. The Japanese recognized that when they saw how their monks that meditated out in nature were healthier. And so they did a lot of research, and they coined the phrase forest bathing. And they've done a lot of phenomenal research that confirm these health benefits of nature. In fact, they have 36 national parks in Japan that have mindfulness hiking trails. And they have postgraduate degrees in nature therapy guiding, and each of those national parks have a team of guides that lead these mindfulness in nature hikes. And that's what Jessica Berry here has set up at the Bailey Track. We'll talk a little bit more about that. 2009 was the first medical journal that started to publish a lot of articles about health benefits. And then in 2013, our national park system started the Park Prescription Program, where they've encouraged physicians to write prescriptions to get people out into nature. And that program's not taken off real well yet, but we're trying. So how do these health benefits come about? Well, the picture on the right shows that there's just a lot of interactions in our body. Different systems communicate with different systems. And the fact is that when you're out in nature, there's an increase in certain good hormones, decrease in certain bad hormones, and functional MRI studies showed actual increased activities in parts of our brain that are specifically related to bringing calmness and relaxation to us. So there's definite physiologic reasons why nature can help us. And so all this scientific research has shown that health benefits do occur if we are more aware and more mindful while we're out there. You know, I know it's important to go out with your friends and walk fast for exercise and talk about things, and that's important to do, but it's also important to maybe set aside a 20 or 30-minute mindfulness walk out in nature. A lot of the research shows that if you spend even as little as 20 minutes out in green space, all these chemical interactions start to occur in your body. If you live near a biodiverse habitat, like here on Sanibel Island, you have more of these good chemicals in your body. And also, if you experience wow moments, like maybe seeing a mangrove cuckoo on the drive or a group of roseate spoonbills, they have done studies where they expose people to wow moments. They took a group of people out and they had them look up at these big, spectacular trees. And then they took another group of people in the city, looked up at big, spectacular skyscrapers, did blood studies, and they found the people looking at the big trees had the release of these calming, healthy chemicals in their body. So what about if you're all cooped up inside, not going outside? Well, Richard Louv is an author who wrote about nature deficit disorder. The book, I think, is on sale at the Ding Darling bookstore. Really opened our eyes to the problems we're having with our youth not getting outside enough. And so Bring the youth, bring your grandkids or kids with you. Get them outside. It's been shown that people who are inside too much have less of the good hormones and they have more of the stress hormones, particularly if you're watching some of the bad news stations. Not going outside, you miss the advantage of vitamin D. And again, there are studies that show if you're inside too much, you have a higher chance of obesity and diabetes. Another interesting study is that they found they did a study where a group of college students spent a little bit of time at an arboretum before they took a test. And then the other group didn't do that. And the group who spent time in an arboretum scored remarkably higher than the group of students who didn't go out in nature before the test. Also a neat study where they had workers who had little cubicles, and they had a group that had a plant at their cubicle, just a little potted plant. And then they had a group who didn't have that, and again, they looked at these blood chemicals and found the group with a plant not only had an increase in the healthy chemicals, but they scored better on tasks related to their jobs. So nature does help, and I think during the pandemic we've all experienced that, particularly through our mental health, but now you know that it does a lot more than just makes you feel better. So get out there, spend time in nature. Well, my last trip on my big year was a third trip to the Florida Keys, where I talked my family into going to a tennis trip. I'm not a tennis player, so I got to go birdie. And on my last day, I met a young man who helped me find a Sager's flycatcher, which was on my need list. And he said, "Hey, there's a really unusual bird down the road. Follow me." So he drives me down to this parking lot on Winley Key. And sure enough, in flew a Bahama mockingbird, a bird that I didn't even know existed. And once in a while it comes up to Florida, and there it was. So I thought, wow, what a cool way to end my big year. And walked back to the parking, where my car was parked in the parking lot. I hear a little rustle in the tree right above me, and I look up, and here is a western spindalis. Again, a bird that rarely visits the Florida Keys from a more southern Caribbean habitat. Another trio of spectacular birds within 20 minutes. So why did I frequently see 3 special birds in a short period of time, often by pure chance or guided by an unexpected guide? And this happened to me 8 different times. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but it happened to me over and over. Why did I see 3 special birds? Well, my son often talked about being Joe Blanda III. He joked about it. You know, my father's name was Joe, and he ended up being a Joe, and he joked about that a lot. He always wore number 3. Very athletic young man, and always wore number 3. And in the Bible, the number 3 is repeated many times, and it's associated with messages sent by your guardian angel. In numerology, study of numbers, the number 3 is linked with energies of optimism, inspiration, kindness, and compassion. So I'll go with that, spiritual connection. What about Hallie Mason, nurse practitioner of 30 years back at Akron, my birding coach? When I think of her, I think of a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that goes, "To leave the world a bit better, to know that one life has breathed easier because you've lived. This is to have succeeded." Well, Hallie passed away from the same brain cancer that took my son's life about 6 months after my big year. And so it's true that everything happens for a reason, but it is always our responsibility to choose the reasons, how and Elroy. And so for me, it was a deeper connection with nature. We all go through adversity. And by me becoming more mindful, I was able to experience the health benefits of nature. I wanted to be like my son and give back when faced with adversity. And nature sure did give back to me. And other things the big year did for me, well, it gave me an opportunity to get out and see and appreciate some of the beautiful areas we have in our country. I became more mindful of my connection to nature and really experienced firsthand how nature can heal, to a degree that I even used it in my practice with some of my patients. And just like this snowy plover is protecting its offspring, the next generation, her children, We need to fight the climate crisis and protect our democracy for our younger generation. We need to leave this planet a better place. We need to leave society better to live in for the future generations. So even when I was in a hurry to see a lot of birds, I learned to be more mindful, to be present in the moment, and while out in nature, I experienced firsthand how nature can heal. And I also just kind of want to share that message with you. Get out in nature and appreciate the health benefits and consider giving back. And so get over to the Bailey Track. February 7th, the new Mindfulness Trail opens with a ribbon cutting, and that's the trail that Jessica Berry over there spearheaded the advent of the trail, supported by Ranger Tony and the staff at Dean Darling. Also, you can sign up for one of the guided mindfulness trails, and those will continue even beyond Wellness Week. So lastly, my big year also brought me many moments of awe. I got to see a lot of really cool birds. I got to see 650 species of birds. That's not a record. Serious big year birders who are out there full time see probably 100 more than that. But I did find out that 650 was a record for a full-time orthopedic surgeon. So I'll take that record. But really, the take-home message to me was that the purpose of life is not to be happy, not to see a lot of birds. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. And so, in conclusion, be more mindful when you're out in nature. The last time my son and I walked Bowman's Beach, he spotted this cloud image as I was texting. I would have missed it because it only lasted about 30 seconds. It just goes to show you how important it is to be mindful when out in nature. And I remind myself how lucky I am to be in such a beautiful environment here on Sanibel Island. And when I'm being mindful out in nature, I realize that nature can heal. It did that for me. And it continues to help me deal with the loss of my parents and son. And this has been an invitation to me to, one, to give back, and one, to share my story. And nature can heal if we help it heal. So my message to you folks is to continue your activism and your volunteerism and donations to our local protectors of our beautiful island, the team at Dean Darling National Wildlife Refuge, and the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. Thank you. Did anyone recognize the mislabeled bird? Anybody recognize the mislabeled bird? I saw a hand go up.
Blackbird warbler.
No, that was a Blackburnian warbler, I think. I'll go back and check. I called this bird a gray jay, and it's a Clark's nuthatcher. Any questions? Any questions? Any comments? Well, get out and enjoy nature. Oh, here's a question.
So just shop?
Yeah, just shop.
So, thank you. And I was exposed to some of these ideas through a book called Your Brain on Nature, which you may be familiar with. But it's written by a naturopath and a medical doctor, which outlines all of the ways that nature is beneficial in all of these different areas. So it's easily accessible on Amazon or whatever. Your Brain on Nature. And then the other thing is that I've noticed with many spiritual paths, a lot of the cycles of worship are tied to the rhythms of nature. And so like the dawn prayer in June is at a different time from the dawn prayer in December, because dawn is at a different time. It's like we're intimately tied in with the cycles of nature.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Your Brain on Nature is one of my favorite books. I met that physician who wrote that book, and just a wonderful person. Another good one is called The Nature Fix. Those are two really good books that talk in more detail about the health benefits. Any other questions, comments? Yes?
Just a simple thing, there's a Women's World magazine restore itself, and it's sad because the steel industry died, but there's a whole beautiful influx of nature coming in, and particularly bald eagles now nest on the rivers in Pittsburgh, which was unheard of. The other thing that I wanted to mention, two other things real quickly, is I live in Delaware, and there's a professor at the University of Delaware, and his big thing is to try to get us to restore native plants, because it's the native plants that are really so important to the birds, and the birds in particular need the caterpillars and the bugs that come through there. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that I was in medicine as well, and knowing that the MRI studies are supporting something that has been known by the meditators forever, that something changes in you, something changes in your brain, and now we have the science that actually can see the changes in the amygdala, has, I think, really helped to emphasize how important it is to be tuned into mindfulness.
Yeah, thanks for those points. Hopefully our society will believe science and get out and spend more time in nature. Doug Tellamy is the author of the book Nature's Best Hope from Delaware. Fantastic book, again, if any of you are interested in the role of what we can do to help nature heal.
Jacqueline, one last question.
Thank you. Can you guys speak a little more about the Mindful Trail? I don't know if that's coming up. I know it was mentioned. I'm not from the area, but I visit here quite a bit. And I'm very excited to hear. I've never heard this before. So I'm very excited to hear about what that trail is going to be like, or what it is, or if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Joe, can you speak on it?
I
You're
can.
part of the
I
team,
can,
right?
yeah. So, following the forest bathing principles that the Japanese started, and then it spread to South Korea, Finland, England, Scandinavian countries. Jessica Berry came up with the idea. She has a degree in psychology, and we got a little team of people together, Bergie and Tony and some of the other rangers. And it's over at the Bailey Track, which is part of the Ding Darling Wildlife Refuge. And there's a short 0.35 mile trail there that will have some QR codes that you can scan with your phone, and then you have the option of listening to a guided meditation. It's really cool, and it's really the first self-guided mindfulness nature trail in this country. And so I really give a lot of credit to the staff here at Ding Darling for getting things started. And I really think it's going to spread throughout the country.
Thank you, Joe. Your presentation was wonderful. It was inspirational, and thank you very much. Get out in nature. Understand that it's good for us all, even if we just sit on a bench and relax and take it easy. Get out there, and thank you for your interest. Thank you for your support. We're doing a lot to bring nature to the kids, from bringing buses to the refuge, thousands of kids being bused there, but bringing the wow out into the urban community. And it's not the same thing as bringing them here, but having them sit in a bus for longer than it takes them to stay at the refuge, to have to get back to get to their bus to get to home. We bring the refuge out to them through the Wildlife on Wheels, and getting them to have that experiential education outside the classroom makes learning fun for them, and it does get them outside and gets that learning a little bit different in connections. We do everything we can to make the little things change, and whether it's here or SCCF or Crow or the Shell Museum or organizations off island, everybody doing their little part makes a difference. So thank you to everybody here for caring. And like we said, we do have a full lecture series beginning. We have our Ding on the Wing to sign up. Next week is the Wellness Week. If you want to go shopping, our new store on Periwinkle is open literally across the street at 2250 Periwinkle. And come visit the refuge. Lots going on, and we appreciate that you care. So thanks for coming.